So we're live. Hey guys, welcome back
Excellent.
to Critical African Thinkers. Very sorry for the delay today. We're having some technical issues. So we're running some close to 15 minutes, 17 minutes late, but we'll try to cover as much as we can in this conversation today. So I'm having a very interesting guest with me today. His name is Luis Razo Bravo. I guess you have already seen the title. People are not equal and equal should not have equal rights to vote. So basically, this conversation started from the Discord as usual. We're having a conversation with Luis on something like this, and I thought it was interesting for us to have a live stream over. He sent me some links to his YouTube channel, Luis Razo Bravo, where he has some interesting stuff. And I've also gone through the channel and I have a ton of questions there as well. But for today, we're going to be focusing mostly on the chat on the Discord, which centered really around equality of people and voting rights. Now I'm hoping that you would have time to come back again because in your video, the first video I watched, there was a lot to unpack there and I will get into it with you, but I don't think the time will permit us to do that now. But for today, so Luis Razo Bravo, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got into this kind of discussion.
Sure. Regarding your first question, I'd love to come back, and I appreciate the interest and the time to the opportunity to talk to you about these ideas. Thanks for also taking a look at my channel, so I appreciate that. And I am available in general whenever you're interested. So count on that. And thanks so much for having me on. Let me say that in terms of a little bit about myself, I am Mexican American. I was raised in the US. I had a more or less typical Mexican American upbringing in Southern California. I attended private schools through grammar school and then in high school. I played football in high school and then in college. I did well enough in high school to be recruited by a number of universities. Among them was Harvard. So I was lucky enough to go to Harvard. I played football there. And at Harvard, I met a very interesting professor, very controversial professor, who remains controversial and very well known to this day in many circles. His name was Richard Herrnstein. And his work really had a dramatic impact on my development and my career and my thinking in general. And his work was primarily connected to something that's taking place on a global level, wherein the most intelligent people of every society are advancing at a rate that's significantly different or faster than people at the opposite end of the spectrum. So as soon as I understood his ideas, I predicted that the world could not, or Western civilization at least, could not make the progress that was predicted or that was sold to me as a younger person, where a continual progress in democracy and equal rights would continually create more and more positive social outcomes. I saw positive social outcomes for some, for the most intelligent, but the opposite at the other end of the intellectual spectrum. So this problem, this challenge of what to do about this difficulty, made me go to the professor and ask him what can possibly be done about this, because I saw a big problem in terms of society dividing more and more, depending on just how much you advanced in equal rights. So the more equal you make a society, it's very counterintuitive, but the more equal you make a society and the less you eliminate the historical barriers to social mobility, what you actually create is more division. You don't create more cohesion. And I think what's happening now in the U.S. is you know, evidence of this fact. And this was something that was predicted by Professor Herrnstein, and it's something that we see playing out more and more in every corner of the world. Nigeria is no exception. Asia is no exception. There's just no exception, because we're dealing with fundamental aspects of human interaction and human natural inequalities, not inequalities that are based on environmental factors, but natural inequalities in just individuals, talent, motivation, upbringing, environment. All of these inequalities, the more you eliminate the social barriers, the more the natural differences are accentuated and the division grows. So that's what's motivated most of my intellectual life. After Harvard, I went on to get a PhD here in Barcelona, where I currently live. And I teach at a number of universities. And I founded something that I call the European Institute of Science in Management. And that doubles as a makeshift research institute, but it also gives me the freedom to make a living for myself, and gives me more ability to chase or to pursue my academic and intellectual interests. And that's where I launched the YouTube channel, and that's through which we met. So that's kind of a long-winded introduction, but that's more or less, I think, what brought us together.
Yeah, all right. Sounds like a very interesting, you've had an interesting career. So now my first question is from the quotes on the Discord, where you said, people are not equal in anything other than dignity. Do you want to expand that for us? People are not equal in anything other than in dignity.
Sure. This is what I believe to be probably one of the most fundamental and important facts about the nature of reality that is, it's really, really important. Humans are equal in dignity and human rights, but we're unequal in every other imaginable way. This is just a fact of life. I mean, even down to the level of fundamental physics. We know from incontrovertible physical experiments that, for example, a radioactive atom, when it decays, they can be exactly 100% absolutely identical, subject to the exact same environments, yet they decay at different rates. One of them might decay in 1 minute, another might take an hour to decay. And they start out fundamentally equal. So there's nothing that explains, so the idea that if we create equality, equal environments, we'll have equal outcomes. It's just a fundamentally, physically untrue tenet about reality. So this comes to us from what I argue are important mistakes in Northern Europe, in the Enlightenment of Northern Europe, where, in particular, Adam Smith and John Locke made two critical mistakes about the nature of price and pricing theory. Adam Smith, on the one hand, and it's called the labor theory of value, where he posited that the value of something is at least partially dependent on the amount of labor that goes into the product. Karl Marx later took this idea and used it as the foundation of communism. So that's why I argue that in some sense, the idea that society is like a pizza that can be doled out equally so that everybody has an equal vote is a mistake about the nature of value, because the truth is, from experiment and from just logic, that every person values things to different degrees, right? and this does not exclude society. Everybody values society to different degrees. So giving everybody one vote and only one vote to express their preferences is a big mistake. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, John Locke argued that humans were a blank slate, that we were born with infinite malleability. That means we can basically engineer the kinds of society that we want based on what we think is the best goal or the best kind of society. And so you have this impulse has been a dominant impulse from that time forward until today. You have a lot of people on the left side of the political spectrum under the assumption that we can engineer equality if we just get the right social system in place. And these are two big mistakes. I suppose that's very long-winded, and maybe a much clearer way to get the main idea across is that if you're trying to create an effective anything, there's obviously different individuals will contribute to that project or to that end goal in different ways. For example, if you're trying to create a just society, you have at one extreme of the human spectrum, you have somebody like Putin, right? Or somebody like Hitler. At the other end of the spectrum, you have somebody like Mother Teresa. So to give these two types of people the same authority to decide whether or not to go to war is just a really bad idea. It's a really, really bad idea. This, coupled with Adam Smith's concept that if everybody just looks out for their own personal interest, the collective group makes out or benefits, that's obviously not universally true. There's obviously cases when this is just the opposite is true. So I'm not sure if that's clear what I meant by people are not equal.
Okay, I get the basic gist of what you're saying or what you said. People are not equal. I think I can agree to that to some extent, because no two people have the same features, no two people have the same capabilities, no two people have the same capacities. You understand? Because I think there are many factors that goes into shaping how an individual turns out. Even people who are raised under similar conditions, there's a possibility they're going to turn out differently. So that is a basic fact of life that I cannot argue with, that I will not argue with. Now, you said people are equal in dignity. Now, when you say dignity, what do you mean by dignity, equality in dignity? And how can that dignity be expressed? How is it quantifiable? How do we assess that people are equal in dignity?
Yeah, good question. I suppose what I mean by equal in dignity is it's a value statement. It's something that we almost universally agree on. I would say we universally agree on. It's a value statement. It's not a statement made about anything physical, like the other kinds of differences that characterize humans. It's based on, it's a value statement. The bottom line is a value statement that we all agree that every human, just by the mere fact of being human, enjoys the privilege of a certain dignity, and that's just a word that we use, that they are equal in this sense of being human. We all participate in that humanity. So it's a value statement. It's also a philosophical statement, because whatever it is that a human is, however you define it, then every human fits into that category. So in those two senses, we're equal. We're equal in our humanity, and we're equal in terms of the value that we give each other as humans, or that we should give each other as humans.
Okay, so if you say we're equal in dignity, we're equal in value, then it has to for it to make any sense, it has to be translatable. It has to be it has to have some tangible consequence in real life. You understand? So how can we express the idea that people are equal in dignity aside just assigning it a value statement? Because if it's just a matter of an idea or a belief, then it doesn't count for anything to just say people are equal in dignity. How does that play out in the real world? How does the quality of my dignity, how does it translate in practice to your equality of dignity? How can we measure that this value system that we're upholding, equality and dignity, actually plays out in reality, instead of it just being an idea that, okay, well, we're equal in dignity and that's all, nothing more.
Well, I think there's some implications that follow from it. One of them, for example, and taking this to the political realm, is giving every person an equal vote, one vote. I think that's one manifestation of an equal dignity. Giving every person a right to a fair trial, a right to freedom of expression. All of these are examples, I would say, that of how we can give or how we can act on the idea that people have equal dignity. And to contrast that, we just have to go back in time and imagine when people did not have equal rights or equal protection under the law, etc. Today, for the most part, in Western countries, people are given equality before the law. So that's an example. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Okay, so it's interesting to note that you said one of the ways in which this equality and dignity is expressed is giving people one vote, one man, one vote. Yet you also argue against one man, one vote. So isn't there some sort of internal contradiction there? Are you not reducing the dignity of a human being by saying, well, you're equal in dignity, and one way in which you express your equality in dignity is having one man, one vote? But that's not a good system. We have to take away that ability for people to have one vote.
Well, sure. I would say that by analogy, it's like starting a race at the same starting line. Everybody starts at the same line, at the starting line, right? So everybody has one vote. But then depending on how much effort, how fast you are, your talent, etc., then in a race, you either come in first, second, third, fourth, or last. Equally, in the political spectrum, the political realm, I would argue that not everybody is equally committed to what the purpose of government is. And the purpose of government, by definition, is to defend, promote the common good. So if a person starts the race with one vote, but then demonstrates through their actions, measurable actions, that they are less committed than somebody who's more committed, then it stands to reason, by virtue of the definition of what the purpose of government is, to give the person who has been more committed to the common good more authority to decide what the rules of the game will be.
So who decides what is for the common good? What is the metric for measuring what is for the common good? And how are we ever sure that the common good, if implemented in practice, would result in the best, would give the best result?
I would say that there's several different ways. If we part from the first principle that every human is imbued with a dignity that should not be infringed upon, then I would argue that it stands to reason that every person or group should be free to decide this question. Okay, and ultimately, something that I haven't mentioned, ultimately, the argument is based on physics and math. So in fact, I wrote my doctoral thesis on the physical and mathematical foundations of management. The idea here in a sentence is that in physics, two of the most fundamental and still mysterious forces to this day are the forces of attraction and repulsion. Isaac Newton, at the beginning of the scientific revolution, in the preface to his Principia Mathematica, said, "This is the best." I'm paraphrasing. He said, "This is the best I've been able to do. I wish I could understand the forces of attraction and repulsion, because my feeling is that these two forces are the most fundamental forces in nature." So fast forward several centuries, and to this day, gravity, which is the force of attraction, and repulsion, which is dark energy, a force that's separating the cosmos. These two forces are two of the most mysterious forces. They still are. So what I do is connect this attraction and repulsion to the attraction and repulsion that humans feel in terms of their interaction with others. There are some acts that are more attractive, that bring people closer to you, and there's other acts that are more repulsive. So this, what I posit, is a mathematical symmetry between these two. Where I'm going with this is that, to answer your question, how do we measure the common good? If we part from the idea that every human is free to decide, then every human should be free to decide. I argue that the most one logical way to begin to test the theory is through what is it that attracts people the most. And what attracts people the most, I argue, or at least one of the things that attracts people the most, is a person who gives their time, energy, money, talent away to others. That's one of the things that attracts people the most. So the proposal, at least at the outset, is to measure commitment to the common good through a person's willingness to pay voluntary taxes above and beyond the taxes that are mandated. So if the law obliges me to pay 15% taxes, if I give an additional 5%, then I should have something that corresponds to that additional 5% that I've given in terms of voting authority to decide on the common rules of society. So to answer your question, how do we measure it? We measure it by a person's financial commitment to the common good.
Okay, now this, I can see a lot of people already fashioning a way to beat the system. A lot of people who do not have the interests of the people, the common good at heart. They have looked at this formula you have given. This is a mathematical formula. This is a scientific formula, and they want to work this system. They know that if they give just a little bit above what they are mandated to, or they give a proportion above what they are mandated to, then they have the power to be able to do whatever they want to do. Now, it's not a function of whether they actually believe in the common good of the people. It's a function of trying to work the system. So how do you guard against this system you are proposing just devolving into another sort of class warfare, another sort of politicking, that in the end, the common good was your goal is not attained?
Well, that's a very common objection. It's connected to another very similar or very common objection, the idea that under such a system, the wealthy would have an obvious advantage, right? Because they have more money, they can give more. So a couple of things in response to that. First is that the voluntary taxes, the proposal, involves proportional taxes, so that a 5% contribution by an average school teacher is equal to a 5% contribution by a billionaire, even when the billionaire gives a lot more in absolute terms. So we're competing on equal grounds. This is another way of acting on the equal dignity of all humans, because I'm a human. I have 24 hours. I have only my person, and I have only my talent to contribute to society. But I can equate to somebody who has a lot more talent and a lot more money in terms of percentage of what I give. I'm giving 5%. It's only, 1,000 euros or whatever it might be. Bill Gates is giving 5%, and that's, several billion dollars, but it doesn't matter. It's still 5%. That's on the one hand. So it's proportional. The rich would not have an advantage. In fact, the rich would have a disadvantage. I'll explain how in a moment. There is a competitive element to the proposal, and that means that people who give 5% would be relatively, not completely powerless, but relatively powerless compared to people that give 10%. And people who give 10% would be relatively powerless compared to people that give 30. And so on, all the way up until 100%. So if a person is giving 100% of their wealth and their income, okay, they are not going to be a dictator. They're not going to be the sole person deciding. They're going to be one person among the many thousands or tens of thousands, if not millions, of other people who also give 100% or nearly 100%. So you're giving everything you have, all of your wealth, all of your inheritance, all of your salary, not to gain power. You're just going to be another voter. You're not going to gain power. You're going to have more power than somebody who gives less, but you're not going to have any more power than the many, many, many who give 100%. So the question then becomes, okay, is it realistic to think that somebody who gives 100% of their income and their wealth and drives themselves into poverty, is it realistic to think that this kind of person is going to make worse decisions than a politician, the kind of politicians who make it into power now, who go into power to get personally rich? That seems like illogical to me. But once again, the proposal is physical and mathematical. If a person didn't like the idea of giving, it's okay. The physics and the math solely only suggest that what needs to be done is we need to move away from equality. You need to give some people more authority than others. This is what nature tells us, because this is how nature works.
Now, so my response to that would be, you are assuming that people are not motivated by personal interests. If I'm motivated because why would I nearly bankrupt myself? If there's anything I know about human beings, is that human beings are sort of selfish creatures, and we're always seeking self-interest. You understand? So why would I nearly bankrupt myself with no clear advantages for me? You understand? What your system is proposing now is, it makes it easier for just about anyone to play dirty politics. So now I don't even have to be inventive. I don't even have to be entrepreneurial. I know that if I'm making $500 per month, and I want to have power, I don't even have to try to scale up. Now with that $500 that I'm making per month, I could decide to give $350, and now I have more power than a man who is earning 1 billion and is giving maybe 500 million. No, let's say 1 million. You understand? Now I have more power, and a whole lot of people can simply get an Excel sheet and do the computations to find out how much they can give with the little that they have to come out on top. And people who think like that can decide to coalesce and to gather the power that they've gotten from giving disproportionately more to further their own interest, which might not be in the interest of the common good.
Okay, I suppose once again, the disproportionate power would be not those that give 350, those that give 500. So if you're giving all of your wealth and all of your salary away, you have to have a place to live, right? You need food. You can't give 100% of your salary and your wealth and be stuck in without. You need to eat. You need to live somewhere. No. So what would happen? This is the theorizing. What would happen is that government itself would be set up in very simplistic monastic or prison-like settings where a person was taken care of in terms of a place to live and food to eat. Okay, so what you're saying is that a person will basically put themselves in prison and give all of their money away for, not for power, just to vote, because they're not going to have power. They're going to
voting is power, because
okay.
The vote is what empowers the politician. You understand? Those people that are actually going to make the laws. And what stops a politician from, for example, bringing out an Excel sheet, doing all the competitions, and looking at the people that he can target to give him the vote to implement his own agenda? You understand? Because nobody is going to give 100% of his salary and not want something in return. Maybe you can find 500 people, 1,000 people that will do that. But there are close to 9 billion people on this earth. Nobody is that altruistic. If someone is going to be doing that, then there has to be something in for that person. And people who have that interest, now they don't even have to be genius. They can be at the level wherever they are. All they just need to do is, just take an Excel sheet and run their programs, and then they know the politicians will just connive with those people, get the power that they want, and do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that anything in history that ever demonstrates anything like that. People driving themselves into poverty for more power. And I disagree with your concept that there are very, very few people. There's actually, out of 9 billion people on the planet, there's at least several million, if not tens of million, that would give 100%. So I disagree, because the idea that humans are equal is just false. There's always a spectrum.
We're not talking about equality. We're talking about interests. You understand?
Sure.
The equality is something differently. We're talking about interest and how people would want to implement it or get their interests met. You understand? I believe that most people are driven by personal interest. That interest might be in the good of other people, it might be in making other people happy, it might be in smiling, but there has to be some interest there. You understand?
Sure.
So yes. So now what I'm saying is that if I'm going to give close to 100% or 100% of my wealth, then I have to be getting something in return, which is obviously more power, voting power, right? Now I have more voting power. Let's say we have 10,000 people like that who have absolutely given much and they have more voting power. What stops a politician from saying, you know what, guys, give 100% of your wealth, of your income. You have more voting power now. Vote me into power. I'm going to take care of you. What stops a politician from doing that?
I think logic and common sense, because
you're assuming that people are going to be logical or reasonable, because you said this is derived fundamentally from physics. People are not that logical. People are very, very emotionally driven, and people are cynical. So maybe in a purely materialistic world, in a purely scientific world, a purely logic driven world, that would make a lot of sense, because it's just ones and zeros, it's calculations. But when you infuse human emotions into something like this, I think it is potentially very, very, very devastating.
Well, you mentioned an Excel sheet. I have an Excel sheet that demonstrates the kinds of assumptions that you would have to make in order for the kind of corruption that you're talking about to happen. And the conclusion from the Excel sheet is that it's completely unrealistic, simply because of the amount of you have to assume that, first of all, a politician would have to cater not to people who are the most corrupt. The politician would have to respond to the people who have given the most for the longest time. If a politician was corrupt and wanted to appeal to somebody who was willing to be corrupt, that person would have, in order to equate the power of the others or the voting power of the others, would have had to start at the age of 18 and give away all of his or her work and wealth to just equal the people who had already done it all their lives. So any politician is going to have to cater primarily or answer primarily to the people who have given the most for the longest time, because they would they would have a disproportionate amount of power. Anybody who was not in that circle could not compete with them. A politician could not come around and say, listen, you guys give all of your money. First of all, very difficult to ask somebody to give away all of their money if they're not actually committed to the ideal. And even if they did give away all their money, they still would not be able to compete with the people who had given it for the longest time.
Okay, now this is my argument.
Okay.
Let's say we have 100 people, and out of that 100 people, 20 people decide to start giving away most of their money when they were, say, 12, and another 30 people decide to start giving away their money when they were, let's say, when they were 20, in their 20s. Then maybe the rest of them start giving away their money, close to 100% of their money when they were in their 40s. Now, it means that the 20 people who were giving away their money when they were 12 would have more voting power, right?
Yes, if the same amount of time occurred, yes.
So because they've given for far longer.
12, not when they're 12.
No, not when they're 12, maybe 20 years down the line. You understand? Yes. 20 years down the line. So they have given more for far longer, proportionately more, not absolutely more, right?
Sure. Yes.
Good. Now, I, as a politician, what stops me from looking at those people, those 20% of the people who have given for that long? What stops me from going to them and finding specifically what they want, what they need, what their interests are? Because remember, they are not the ones that are going to have the final power to make policies. It's still the politician. They just have the vote to put the politician in power, right? Now, what stops me? This is exactly what marketing does. Marketing tries to understand people's wants and needs and try to respond to it. So what stops the politician from going to those people, knowing fully well that we're not purely logical, rational beings, we're also very emotional beings, and people have wants, they want needs, they have secret desires. What stops the politician from, targeting those people specifically, cutting them, giving them what they want just to get the power and implementing whatever policies that they wanted to implement in the first place?
Well, I think a couple of things that I foresee. The political elite under this proposal are those who have given the most for the longest time. It makes absolutely no sense in my mind that anybody outside of this political elite would have the kind of authority, moral authority, or any other kind of authority to persuade these people. Because these people, right? Now, let me give you an example. It's like, imagine elite marathon runners, right? The most elite marathon runners in the world. By analogy, what you're telling me is that, imagine the most elite marathon runners in the world. Imagine some overweight, obese person comes and tells them, look, I have a better way for you to run, or I have better ideas for you to run, or I have better ways to change the rules of the marathon. It just makes no sense.
But this is not even
how people work.
This is not even about talent. This is about money. This is about resources. And from what you're proposing, you don't even need to be particularly talented to make the money to give enough for you to have that power. You understand? So it's not even more talented people courting people who are not as talented. This is simply people looking at those who have money, which anybody, if you're earning $1 per day, you could get as much, you can be at the top of the political spectrum in terms of having the votes, because you can give that $1 away, even though you are not so productive, even though you are not so talented. You understand? So even at that say, the politicians are still going to be taken from that crop of people. Understanding this, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before these politicians figure out, you know what, this is a way to gain power. It may be 100 years, maybe 50 years, but people are going to work that system and say, you know what, I'm just simply going to raise this particular set of people, feed them this ideology that you don't have to work so much. All you just need to do, at whatever level that you are earning an income, make sure you give this certain amount, such that you have the political power, you have the voting power to implement whatever policies you're going to implement when you get to that place. So it's not about talent now, it's about money. And why is money the basis for assigning who gets to have more political power, who gets to have more votes? Why is it money?
It's just a proposal. Let me go back and repeat the idea that it's physical and mathematical. So if we argue from the basis, or if we start from the basis that every human has equal dignity, then you can choose whatever you want. You can choose height or weight or anything else. The idea is, okay, let's test it and see what works. Let's test it and see what works. Let's give people who are taller more power. Let's give people who are smarter more power. Let's give people who are more entrepreneurial more power. The idea is to move away from equality, because equality is not in nature. Nature does not organize itself on an equal foundation. Move away from that. Okay. If a person doesn't agree,
let me ask you a question. Yeah, nature is fundamentally unequal, but we're also humans, we're social creatures, and we evolve socially. Are you telling me that we are better off when it was the Wild West, when it was, every man for himself, than we are now, where we can now take into consideration those who are not as privileged, or those who are not as talented, or those who are not as skilled, or those who are not even as fit? Because our humanity is being able to look after those who might be disadvantaged. That is the core of, in essence, the current Western civilization. You understand? If we are going to go by the principle of saying nature, hierarchies exist in nature and it is survival of the fittest, that's what we had in the past, and that was why certain nations were aggressive, because they thought they had the power to oppress other nations. That's not for the common good of people in the world. Currently, what Russia is doing it because they have the power. So is might right? Does might make right? But the fact that nature is unequal, people are given unequal talents, doesn't mean that as social creatures we cannot pool our resources together. For example, children. What stops us from just stomping a child? The child doesn't have as much cognitive abilities as an adult. A child doesn't have as much money as an adult. Why are we even considerate of children? What about the elderly? Why are we even considerate of them? What about pregnant people? They might not be able to contribute as much to society as an able-bodied young man. So if we're going to look at it from that perspective, it just turns life into a game of survival. And this survival is very, very brutal. And I don't think it's the best thing for the human race, because we have gone to a point where we have developed a system, a society where we can cater for all kinds of people, knowing fully well that you agree that we're all equal in dignity. And I think one way in which that dignity is shown, that even though you are not as talented, even though you are not as this, then you should be assured a minimum level of certain existence. It shouldn't just be You know what? You can't cut it, then you go down and it's your fault. Nothing else.
Yeah, I think maybe you misunderstood the proposal then, because as far as I'm concerned, the goal is precisely to take care of the most underprivileged and the most defenseless of society. It stands to reason, according to how I see it, that somebody who gives all of their money for the longest time, and there's many examples of this throughout history.
What is motivating that person to give that much? Can you explain the motivations behind why someone would give that much?
Sure, I think there's many different reasons, but for example, in the Catholic tradition, it's the example of Christ, who gave his whole life for the sake of others. From the life of Christ to now, there's been tens of thousands of people who have given their lives and their talent and their ability to other people freely.
And those are those the majority, or are those the exceptions?
Well, once again, we're talking about humans are unequal. So there's always a spectrum. Anything you measure in humanity, anything you measure, there's always going to be a bell curve distribution from from one end of the spectrum that you measure to the other extreme of the spectrum. If we measure selflessness, there's always going to be, and there always has been, it's historically the fact, that there's people who have given, and still to this day, even if you look on the list of billionaires, there's a list, a website called thegivingpledge.com. It lists all of the billionaires who have pledged the vast majority of their wealth away. People aren't equal. So this idea that nobody gives, it just isn't true. Lots of people give for many different reasons. And it stands to reason that these people, the ones who give most of their stuff away, don't do it for the kinds of motivations that are driving people like Putin or Hitler or these other people.
How are you sure? About the last point you just made?
We know it from historic. It's an analysis of history. Most of these
Examples?
People, for example, well, we just celebrated Catherine Drexel, who was an American Catholic saint who gave away her several millions of her inheritance and wealth, went into voluntary poverty, and then founded a number of schools, among them Xavier University and many other schools that are still working to this day. That's one example of tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands compared to 9 billion people on the planet. How does that, except you're going to give only those people power? Because, okay, let's take the United States, for example. In the United States, there are about 300 million people. Out of that 300 million people, how many people do you think would have this kind of altruistic outlook compared to the rest of the population?
Well, if you just work with basic assumptions, if you just work with 0.1%, not 1%, 0.1%, you're already dealing with 30,000 people. 30,000, okay. Just 0.1%. And I think 0.1% is very low. If we establish this kind of competition, I'm confident that there would be many people who respond to it, who feel called to it. And one thing that's I think is interesting is that it's not by accident that what I mentioned earlier about the Catholic Church, it's the only organization that has survived 2,000 years. Everything else comes and goes. Everything else fades away. Nothing ever lasts. And I would argue that one of the reasons that it lasts, or the main reason that it lasts, is precisely because all of the people who have given so much to their society, to their fellow human beings, etc., in spite of all of the bad that happens. In other words, in the case of the Catholic Church, the good has outweighed the bad, so that the Catholic Church has survived. It has survived. In other cases, Hitler,
I don't think it's the good, in quotes, of the Catholic Church that has made it survive. Well, but that's another argument. So now my question would be, now if there is a finite number of votes, let's say 300 million votes, how are you going to apportion that 300 million votes, taking into consideration that 0.1% of the population, which is 30,000, have given the maximum? What proportion of that vote is going to go to that 30,000 people, and what proportion of the votes is going to go to the rest of the population?
Well, it's a very specific formula. It's something that's been derived from both physics and social choice theory, which is a branch of economics that studies how we make collective decisions. And at the heart of that formula is the quadratic math. So that just like the sun and the earth revolves around the sun according to quadratic math, the votes would be apportioned according to the quadratic math associated with their voluntary tax rates. So a person who gave 10%, you would square that to get the number of votes that they have. A person who gave 90%, you square that to get the number of votes that they have. A person who gives 100, you square that and you give that person 100%. I'm sorry, you give that person that amount of voting power. That's the proposal, at least at the outset. Obviously, it's subject to scrutiny, to testing, to any number of other things that we do in science, no? And I think one thing I'd like to my time is running out here, I'm really sorry, but one thing I'd like to clarify is that we disagree, right? We disagree. But humans always disagree, right? Humans are always going to disagree. We're going to disagree about everything. So this issue here is not about the kinds of things that we've been disagreeing about here. It's on a higher level of abstraction. It's about how to resolve our differences of opinion, not to hammer out our different arguments or our different visions about the nature of reality or our different goals for the future. Humans always disagree. The question is, how are we going to resolve our differences of opinion? Because we're never going to agree. So my fundamental argument is this, and I have yet to find somebody who give me a logical counter argument to this. So if you have one, I would welcome it. Democracy, one person, one vote, has a number of well-established, well-known internal mathematical contradictions. Kenneth Arrow got the Nobel Prize in 1950 or so for demonstrating mathematically that democracy just can't work. Got a Nobel Prize for this. This is one of the biggest questions, open questions in social choice theory. The inherent difficulties of democracy, and specifically one person, one vote. Okay, so I'm proposing a way to resolve that.
So what are those contradictions? What are those mathematical contradictions with democracy that he identified?
Yeah, well, there's a number of them. And in fact, it goes back to a philosopher here in Catalonia, here in Spain, by the name of Ramon Llull, who pointed out the logical contradictions depending on how you configure an election, because this is election theory. But based on how you configure the election, the candidates in any given election, you come into internal contradictions depending on how you organize the vote. And so Kenneth Arrow formalized this, and he set out a series of assumptions. If we assume that a fair system is going to involve transitiveness, commutativity, he has a series of parameters. If this is what a fair system is, then he demonstrates that we can never arrive at it through one person, one vote. We can't. It's mathematically inconsistent. I would encourage anybody listening to take a look at it. It's I'm not making it up. It's something that is, in fact, he founded social choice theory.
Okay. All right, Luis. It's been a good discussion we've had for close to an hour. I know you want to run off anytime soon, but I would really love you to come back again, because we have so much to talk about, and maybe this time will be much more pointed in the discussion. So thank you very, very much for coming. I really, really appreciate. I think your ideas are fantastic. Maybe I'm still trying to process it, and maybe after talking for more, after having more conversations, I may begin to see your point of view. So I'm not just critiquing it for the sake of critique. I'm genuinely trying to understand your position. If that makes any sense.
No, I appreciate it. Absolutely, absolutely. It's what, you know, what's interesting, Charles, is this is even when I think about it myself, it's very surprising. It's baffling. It's such an easy and it's such a simple idea, yet nobody's ever proposed it. It's just amazing, right? In fact, I talked to Noam Chomsky, of course, the very famous Noam Chomsky of MIT, and we've been exchanging emails. And I said, well, at the very least, you have to admit that you've never heard this proposal before. And he said, you're right, I've never heard of that before. And this is Noam Chomsky, who's written 130 plus books, and he's just he's a walking encyclopedia. And this is baffling. How can such a simple idea have never been thought about? You think of all of the amazing people in history who have from Plato to Aristotle, on through all of the history of political philosophy, political theory, and it's never even been thought of. This is shocking if you think about it. It's shocking. But I appreciate your time. Count on me to come back anytime you'd like. It's always never. You're not an exception in terms of it's a shocking proposal. Everybody is thrown off guard. I've had entire roomfuls of academics who are given to argument and defense and back and forth arguments. I've had entire roomfuls of academics listen to the proposal and go completely silent, and then furthermore walk out without saying a word. It's the most baffling thing I've ever seen in my life. How can you get a series of academics to go silent? It's either so stupid that it's not even worth mentioning, or something else is happening. If it's really that stupid, I wish somebody would wake me up and tell me how or where.
All right. So there's one question here that says, before you go, I would like Luis to summarize one more time his perspective, if he can. So just give us a summary of your perspective, and that should be all.
Sure. The summary is this: that in terms of equality, that human beings are not equal, and until we move beyond this mistake, and it's a very real, well-established mistake that comes from the Enlightenment, that about the theory about the nature of value, we're not going to move beyond the kinds of tensions and the kinds of problems we're having in the world at the moment. And maybe the most clear way to express why human inequality is important for politics is there's obviously a best kind of ruler and a worst kind of ruler, right? If you give the best kind of rulers in society equal vote as the worst kind of rulers, and there's more worst kind of rulers, then we're going to get what we have in the world at the moment, a world driven primarily by politicians who are self-interested, who are not working for the common good, who are working to fatten their own pockets and those of the people around them and their families. So there's a price to pay for this. A big part of the price is being paid by the people in Ukraine. The US has tried to get Ukraine to come to the West. Now they're abandoning them. Russia, for the equal reasons, self-interested reasons, has invaded the country. This self-interest on both sides of this war and this tension is what leads to the kinds of problems we're having on the planet at the moment. You asked me for a summary. That wasn't a very good summary, but I tried.
Well, thank you very much, Luis, for coming. We really appreciate your time. So I'm going to open up the stream. You don't have to be here. If you have to leave, you can leave. So I'm still going to be talking with some of my other viewers, which is what we do regularly. So I really want to appreciate that you were able to spend time with us to give us these ideas, and definitely want you to come back pretty soon so we can talk more about these ideas.
Well, so thank you very much, Charles. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't stay. I'm already 19 minutes over, and I'm under a lot of pressure at work. But I appreciate it. Count on me to come back anytime.
Yeah, we'll definitely set it up soon. All right.
Charles, take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
So guys, the stream is open. Chloe, hop on. Steve, hop on. Unpopular, hop on. Ogie, hop on. Let's talk about this fantastic idea that we just had here. Let's see if I think maybe Chloe understands what he was trying to say more than I do. So Chloe, come and explain. Come explain. Yep. Chloe, try coming back in again. Okay, good. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello.
Yep. Oh, there should be. Oh shoot! There's an echo. I know. All right. I wish you could have stayed on. I understand his idea, and again, like I said, this is something that is similar in the cryptocurrency space of the DAO. That is a very popular idea right now, and the idea because like this whole NFT craze, right? And a lot of NFTs are just rife with scams. People build up their NFTs, have these projects, and then they essentially do what is called a rug pull. So it's a very corrupt space, but one type of potential solution that people are kind of considering is to have a DAO, which is you have a decentralized autonomous organization in which those participants, they invest, the more that they invest into it, the more that they have a vote. So they actually have an inherent motivation. The voting body has an inherent motivation to make sure that the project survives, that it's successful. And so I think that's what Lewis's idea sounds like the most to me. However, there is a limitation to this, as the limitation of the quality of people that are fully invested into these ideas. And so this might sound like a weird tangent, but how many of you how many of you have seen Dune? And how many of you the books, the movies, and then there's the recent movie. It's a very, very popular intellectual property right now. And so
I've seen it.
Yeah. Okay. But but this relates to a DAO story, right? So there is a Spice DAO, which is inspired by Hubert's Frank Hubert's work, Dune. And so they had this idea that they loved Dune so much that they're going to create a DAO. So they made a DAO. And of course their cryptocurrency is called Spice. And so they decided that they want to use this organization and use this cryptocurrency to basically make Dune type of media projects. They want to create more. They want to create more value. And so they had one person who invested about $3 million into the DAO. So he had the voting rights. So they used that money to buy basically an old book. It was basically there's this director called Alexander Jodorowsky, who he was supposed to make a movie of Dune. It's supposed to be the greatest Dune movie ever that was never made. And he has like this, there's like this book that he would give to all these different types of producers to see if they can fund his movie idea. And it had all this concept art. And it's like these coveted things. There are like only maybe like 30 in the whole world. And so there's one of these things that was put up for auction for around $30,000. So they decided to buy it for $3 million at an auction. Like multiple times how much it was worth. And they bought it thinking that if they bought it for that amount of money, they would own the rights to the Dune property. So they did this whole thing, spent a lot of money for the greater good, but did it work out for them? Like, the person who had this idea had like, they spent the money, but like, is Warner Brothers going to let them?
Yeah.
All right.
Here's the biggest issue though, and this is true with any cryptocurrency. It's all out there on the blockchain. All it takes is to shut down that blockchain and you're left with a whole lot of nothing. And yes, it may be hard to do it, but it can be done. Hell, a solar flare can take out the entire internet, including the blockchains. Which is why I feel that we should go with more of a physical currency. Not to mention the fact that, let's say, for example, we did do like a DAO or something on cryptocurrency. Who's to say that that organization can't go and just shut down their blockchain immediately? I.e., you lose all the money you paid into crypto, you lose all the money you paid into NFTs, you lose all the money you pay into everything.
Well, the idea of the DAO is the people that are making the decisions are the people who put their money into it. So that's kind of like supposed to be the thing. But like the greater story here is that, you know, they have these people in the Spice DAO, they had the greatest good interest, and these are the decisions that they made, right? They had people who are trying to make, creative properties that didn't know basic, like intellectual property laws in basic, first world countries, which is where they would basically have to sell this. And they're still trying to, I think, make a property, but like the thing is that you're still limited by the quality of people and their knowledge and their ability to execute on their ideas. You're still limited by that in that governing.
You guys are losing me with this blockchain
but
conversation.
Well, again, it all goes back to the ability to shut down the blockchain, because pure and simple. Let's say we set up a DAO tomorrow.
Well,
and took care of all of the blockchain, and it was supposed to be overseen by the people who paid into the cryptocurrencies. Who's
all
to
right,
say
so
that, for example,
let's do something. I know, Chloe. I know this was an example to sort of buttress what Louis has said.
Yeah.
So can we sort of bring it back to his basic premise, the basic premise of what he was saying? And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, that's why it's like the thing is that you're still limited by the abilities of the people who have invested the most in governing. That's the thing. You're still limited by those people. And the people that are willing to give the most might not make the best decisions. They might be really, really passionate. They might be really pure of heart, but it doesn't guarantee that they're going to make the best decisions.
or even that they might get a decision. I mean, look at what Canada did to the banks. If there's a DAO, who's to say that, for example, let's say there was a DAO on U.S. cryptocurrency.
Well, this isn't specific about currency. This isn't specifically about like cryptocurrency. This is the idea of how things should be governed in general. I'm not this is like, because like for this whole DAO, they're not even talking about like money. They're talking about creating art.
Yeah.
The DAO is about creating art.
So Steve, jump in.
So
Steve,
I jumped into the very last.
Oge and Mr. Pillow.
Yeah, I jumped in at the very last of the video, Charles, because I actually fell asleep. I took a nap before I saw your post, so I just only caught about the last 10 minutes of it. And I'll tell you why I think he's wrong, and that we shouldn't support that kind of an idea. It's severalfold. One is the reason why nobody is arguing him is because on one side, I think he might be misperceiving it as to be a brilliant idea instead of an idea that we've seen enough before and we're not going to advocate for it. One of the reasons why is because whenever we've had a society where certain people were considered a lower value and should not have a vote, every time we've seen that, because we've seen that throughout history. You know, we saw it through imperialism, we saw it through serfdom. We saw it because the serfs never had a vote, right? It was always just the highest top of the people who had the biggest investment in the crown, right? In the imperial state, and it didn't work. France struggled with this multiple times until the French just decided to cut their heads off. Like, it's a bad idea. Not to mention when you're immediately starting off the conversation telling people because you don't have money, you don't have as much worth as someone else. And it also goes back to, like, what value is he using as a metric to tell me that I'm not better than someone else?
Well, so to be fair to his idea, he's talking about the proportionality of your investment to your income. So
Okay.
it's not about the largest check. It's about the percentage. So if you're a school teacher and you give 5% of your income to in taxes, and Bill Gates gives 5% of his income in extra taxes, they have the same vote.
Right.
So
yeah, I don't like that either.
He's trying to make it like to lower the barrier that anyone who wants to have more power in government actually has the ability and can, irregardless of their income. They just have to show an investment proportion to like what they're able to provide, and that is enough commitment, instead of just having it to be an absolute value.
I don't like it, and the reason why is because that metric is inherently flawed when you don't have money to put into it in the first place.
But the thing is, the lower the amount of money you have, the easier it actually is.
Well, I don't know how much money he's never had, but I can tell you when you're poor, you don't got shit to put in.
I believe he's also advocating for a basic. I think I've seen it as like basically, you know, some universal basic income type of thing, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, Chloe and Steve, sorry, I just want to jump in real quick before that. And more to Chloe's point, I think Chloe makes you make very brilliant points about more kind of the quality of leadership. I honestly would still have to watch the video just one more time to kind of get a firmer understanding, but I just kind of want to take it from his basic premise, which is that there basically is no equality in human nature or in society. And coming off of that, I guess my question is, this would be a society where there is a fundamental understanding / recognition and acceptance of the dignity inherent in the individual, that somehow has some material social recognition. And that's kind of where I'm trying to tie it in, is that he's talking about a society where everyone has that particular value system or modality of understanding in terms of the worth of the individual, which then would allow them recognize the merits of being altruistic, right? Of giving. Now, I guess the what I wonder is, in terms of the assumptions, I'm bringing in, is how does he mitigate this kind of society from the risk of abuse, right? And also from the potential because the quality of leadership obviously seems like something that cannot be guaranteed. You're just what you can guarantee is that, like Chloe said, people would be passionate about filling in those leadership roles. Now, also, I guess another question I wanted to that was kind of formulated in my mind is the amount being donated. For instance, I don't say donated, but put in for the purpose of taxes, right? Like, who determines how this amount is being apportioned, and to what area of society is it going to be apportioned to? So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I'm personally trying to take it more from the perspective of, one, you would basically need to reorientate a society to follow this this what I would term to be like a fundamental human principle, right? Like, you would literally have to get everyone on the same page. But then how do you account for the potential of abuse? So I guess that's my
There's also
There's a better
Well,
system.
if I could finish, that'd be great, because I've got to get going. The reason that I have a problem with what he's saying is because, for one thing, he's not really making it clear why that metric that we're using to measure value by is important in the first place. Second of all, it completely distinguishes the idea that all human beings are equal in value in the first place. I don't like that. And if you're using money to make the metric, I know plenty of really phenomenal people who have really shit control of their money and their finances. That doesn't mean that they can't have political input into the world. They absolutely should, especially because when you factor in the fact that the people voting might not be in the same situation that the people that aren't voting are in. So you have a massive disparity between those who are putting in and those who are getting out. On top of that, he's also conflating the fall of democracy to voters instead of actually attributing it to where it belongs, which is the people that we voted in were the problem, giving them too much power to be able to make rules, raise their own wages. Insider trading is a serious issue in Congress, which is why everybody goes out richer than they came in, right? There's so many fucking issues here. Excuse my language. There's so many issues here that I don't think he's explaining clearly enough. But at the highest fruit in the tree, the biggest problem is the valuation of human beings as a place of value, which is, I'm having a hard time biting this apple that he's given me, because it sounds really similar to some other things that we've tried historically, and I'm not taking it. I'm not taking the bite.
Yeah,
So he's going to have to explain it a lot better than he has before. But I love you guys. I got to go. I have a guest.
Before you go, there's just one thing.
Oh,
Steve.
thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
I think that we've already got a better method than what he's talking about, and that would be to take the electoral college from just the federal level and apply it to the state as well. That way, New York City's not a tyranny of New York, for example.
That's definitely a possibility, but I really got to go. I've got a guest I need to speak to.
Thanks, Steve.
So I
Yeah.
love you guys. See ya.
All right, Steve. Thanks.
Later, Steve.
Mr. Bello, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Bello. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I hear what Steve's saying, and I hear what Ogie was saying, and it do sound like a lot of stuff because I think his idea kind of has been tried in terms of like Tibet. If you look at Tibet, it almost sounds like a Tibetan theocracy. And that's what it kind of sounds like. It sounds like a Buddhist Tibetan theocracy where everybody's a monk. Like all the ruling class are a bunch of monks, and the monks tell everybody else what and rule the rest of society because the monks technically give everything they have because they don't work for no money. All they do is serve the Buddhist religion, and it becomes a theocracy. So his ideas happen. So basically, his idea is basically really starting another religion. That's basically what his idea is. He wants to make some type of religion and have a religious government. And I mean, it happened. It's happened before. We have a history of it now. Is who wants to buy into that religion? That's basically what it boils down to. It's like he's proposing a religion. That's all I want to say for now about it. But it's not like far fetched in terms of what he's saying. If you want to think of similar things to me, because that's the way I look at like a Tibetan theocracy, like the Dalai Lama and stuff. When they used to rule, that's kind of how it was. They had a theocracy of monks who supposedly gave everything to the cause of Buddhism. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. So that was one comment that I had is like, what is stopping from like let's say a cult who has a bunch of dedicated members and the cult leader says, hey, you guys, all you need to do is donate everything that you have. They're already willing to do that to the cult leader. So why don't you just do that to the government in terms of your taxes? And then you have the voting power to like vote me supreme leader or something like that. And like, that is like, that's Rush Purnam in Oregon. I mean, that's what, a cult leader tried to do is basically got as many cult members in a county to basically vote for the whole, like the whole like board of the local government to be those cult members. And so like, I understand how he thinks that, if you have people who are truly altruistic, that would protect against corruption. But there is another higher level of corruption of ideas or of cult of personalities where you can believe that you're 100% doing the right thing, but it's not the right thing because, and it's kind of like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It can easily run afoul of that.
Yep. Yeah, and like I was saying, on top of everything else, it's just too easy to manipulate. I mean, let's go with the idea that everything switched over to cryptocurrency, and the more cryptocurrency that you give, the more power you've got. That's easy to be abused. I mean, pure and simple. Who's to say that there might be people who work for such a DAO altering numbers? Who's to say that there might not be someone at that DAO taking bribes? I mean, pure and simple, it's just too easy to scam just about anything that's monetary in value.
Yeah, and the point that Steve made about there was one point that Steve made that I wanted to make an allusion to. It's skipping me right now. Maybe it will come back to me. Okay, do you have anything to add now? Let me think about that point.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I'm actually looking forward to kind of going back to the video and kind of listening through again. What I found interesting is that he didn't, I don't know, his model doesn't seem to account for, and Charles, I know you were pressing him on this just kind of based on interest and power. but he was leaning more, which actually even ties more to for me to recognize Mr. Pelu's position on maybe it being more a model that borrows from some theocratic ideology, because it doesn't seem to recognize human self-interest and how that can somehow culminate into power and control. And so I know he also used the example of the Catholic Church as an establishment. I wouldn't. Well, you know what? I would presume he's a religious person, so I wouldn't. But that was, yeah. I like how Charles was able to kind of rebut it a bit on that. But I think I would really need to, like, seriously go back to the video and listen through clearly. There are a couple of things I kind of trying to figure out in terms of his module is more the concern with power. Like, why does that seem to be elusive? Self-interest, why does that seem to be elusive? And why does he believe that somehow by people being altruistic, that could culminate into a less exploitative, corrupt governmental system? So, yeah, I would definitely need to take a second listen.
Yep. I mean, to be honest with you, the best way to avoid a corrupt system would be to start with pulling power from the government. Number two, going and moving on to the state elections or state electoral college. And I mean, we've just got to uproot all of the corruption from it. We've got to treat it like a gangrenous cut and literally clean all the gangrene out before we fix the issue.
Can I quickly comment?
Yeah. So,
Run away.
well, 1 minute, Anan, before you comment. So the point that Steve was making was about power. So I think Luis is trying to say the method of getting, there's a flaw in the method or in the process of getting power, instead of recognizing that the flaw is in those people who already have the power. Like Milton Friedman would say that it's those who are interested in power that would get power, not those who should, or not those who have the best interest in at heart. So whatever mechanism or whatever purpose, whatever way people are going to use to get power, those who are interested in power for the sake of power, for the sake of politics, they are going to find a way to work the system. So even if you sort of change the rules, change the system of them obtaining that power, they are going to find a way to make sure that they are the receiving end of that power. And when they get that power, they're going to do whatever they want to do. So in the end, you have still not changed anything. You've not improved any system. You've just made it much more technical and probably more bureaucratic.
Okay. If I could quickly comment, I have to run soon, so I'm not going to respond to his actual argument. I'm just going to say that he has a channel in the Discord server in Fax Chamber, and I posted several of his videos that I thought were most relevant, and a lot of his content I thought was most relevant. He will also answer any questions you have on there, and I think it would be great to also engage him on things other than his proposal. For example, on the distribution of intelligence in the general population, the distribution of mental health in the general population, and how these things can be influenced. A lot of why he's proposing this has to do with his understanding of intelligence, the fluidity of intelligence, and how intelligence affects a lot of other things in the world. So if you can please, read his stuff and then respond. And one reason it'd be nice to talk to him is it would help to interview neuroscientists later on, to be able to interact with him in detail.
All right, Anan. Go on, okay.
Yeah, I could definitely, hmm, I could definitely see that. I mean, if he's approaching, like I said again, like for me, I don't, Charles, and I think I'm kind of coming at his perspective just by following through on his initial premise, which is that um, um, all human beings are created equal. You get what I'm saying? Trying to understand how does he, like, what does that mean to him, and how does he see it operationalizing within this module?
Now,
Because yeah,
so one thing I didn't seem to get was that he was making a biological argument and then making a proposal that was divorced from a biological argument. Because if we say people are not equal, you understand, except in dignity, and therefore it means that there is some sort of biological differences. You understand, people are endowed to different extent, which yes, I do agree to that point, that not everyone has the same capabilities, whether physical, mental, psychological, or what have you. You understand? Now, if he was even basing the electoral system on, let us optimize for the people who have the best features to have the best sort of electoral power, then it will seem more consistent. But then he flips it to say that no, those who would have more power to vote would be those who are more aligned to the common good of the people. And the way you measure people who are more aligned to the common good of the people is by how much they are able to give
give.
in proportion to their income. So I just didn't see the link. I didn't see the link there.
Yeah. So I think I think to be fair, he also said like it was just that was one metric that he was possibly thinking about, is like how much you give in terms of taxes. I think that he might be perceptive, or might have heard about like this concept of, I think Andrew Yang had like the time bank. Like if you donate your time, if you donate your time to like your community, or to park cleanup, or you do Meals on Wheels or something like that, that actually can also equate into like a type of currency as well, but it's just your time that is acknowledging the time that you've dedicated.
So what stops people that want power to do that? Take, for example, these social justice types and all those today that are using virtue signaling to grab power. They'll grovel at you and do all the kneeling with kente clothes and wearing a flag of Ukraine and doing all those things. But it doesn't mean they have the best interests of those people. They're just seeking power. So they'll do the things that will get them the power.
The best way to do it, to be honest with you, if you want to go that route, would be basically a variation of what they talked about in Starship Troopers. Service equals citizenship. It doesn't have to be military service.
Mm-hmm.
We could do like the German method, where if you feel that strongly about going or against going to war, you can serve the community. Like they'll have people sit down and do their time, their year that they'd normally serve as a soldier, helping the elderly, or, for example, working on government vehicles, or working cleaning up parks, all that kind of stuff. Let me look up the name for it real quick.
Mm-hmm. There was something I wanted to add. It's all also, we already kind of have it, right? Like in order for people to, like, everyone has the right or has the ability, irregardless of their basic income or attributes or whatever, to vote, right? They only have to be willing to go to the polls. And the rate of people that vote in this in the United States is still fairly low. So like we still have a bunch of people who do have the ability to assert or to vote in or to assert some type of power, but they still choose not to. And I think that in this system, it would really kind of refine that even tighter, that the people that it reduces the competition, I would say. And again, it doesn't guarantee that the people that kind of are the ones who are minded towards governing, whether they have like a purely good, or like whether they're purely altruistic or not, it still doesn't change the factor of, do they actually have the best ideas, or do they even have like a good ability of picking people who are good implementers of ideas? That's also another aspect of it. You can have a great idea, but have no idea how to implement it. So what's the point of voting in a good idea if no one can bring it to fruition?
Yeah, unpopular. Jump in.
Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, the main thing that I want to talk about is just like the rule concept of how I was raised in America. Like, my people were very country, you know what I'm saying? My great grandmother taught me a lot of things. She grew up in the she was born in the 1920s. You know, she wasn't grown. She didn't grow up on all this city shit that's going down in America now. All this cryptocurrency shit we talk about, cell phones, these fucking cars that they have, excuse my language, all this shit that's going on nowadays in America that us young folks love to rave about. And it's crazy because the people that slaved and built this country, you know what I'm saying, it has completely changed. It's turned into this shit show of capitalism, where everybody is bragging about the shit that they have or where they come from and all this shit. And it's like nobody actually talks about, you know, when people do talk about their upbringing, you don't knock them for, you know, how they was raised or something. It's not about that. But for the most part, we don't want to sit up here and talk about how, environmentalists or economists that's out here trying to help the country, you know, prosper. And they're trying to prosper in their own right. You know what I'm saying? I think I was having this conversation with Stanley. I was saying that you could be born into the political spectrum. Like, America has always been a two-party system for as long as I could remember. I mean, beforehand, it probably started off with all these other things like federations and all these other things that was going on. But once all the collaborations or whatever went down, it turned into a two-party system, the Democrats and the Republicans. And one thing I've learned about the Democrats is it seems like they are always after capital. They are very much focused on the capital that they accumulate and the power that they can obtain. And when it comes to more of these Republican-minded people, you would hope that they would stand for a more conventional sense of how America was. That's what I believe. I believe the Conservative Party of America should be more environmentalist, more economist. When it comes to all sense of things like family, friends, religion, banking, education, and all these things. And it's just like a lot of the times people get the short end of the stick, and these people get called poor. And they get called all types of names, white trash and all this shit. And it's a humiliating aspect of what's going on out here. And when we're talking about voting, let's say I think I'm always vote Republican. Like right now, I'm pretty much a Republican. You know, and it's crazy because you know, for a long time, African Americans didn't even have the right to vote. So when somebody says some shit like that, it doesn't sound right to a lot of people. But I do have the right to vote, and I'm going to vote Republican because I'm more about conserving this nation instead of running it, instead of the way that it's being ran. But the opposition is always going to be an opposition in this country, and that's messed up because I feel like it's always going to be opposition. You're always going to be up against somebody that's not going to want to see you succeed, not going to want to see your plans go through. And that is the hard truth about what's going on here. So if you want to know what's going on in America, democracy. That's about it. So if you were born into that lineage of democracy, I mean, I'm not against you, but I'm gonna be honest, like I could give two fucks about what you have to say.
Yeah, someone's mic is wow. Someone's mic is making that noise. Yeah, so yeah, unpopular. Cool. Mr. Pilu, you have any more thoughts?
Well, hold on. No, not really. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, I probably have to go back and watch more of his material because he has a YouTube page. I'll go look back at his material, but it was very interesting. He did a good job talking to him and trying to get to that. Do I think it could work off the bat? I would say no. It's like making another religion. Like I said, it's like that's literally another religion to me. It's like a religion of altruism and giving the money. But how can you really do it? It depends. I mean, if you're able to do it, have a goal, and people understand it and have a religion, everybody agrees to that religion. Because I know he said everybody's equal. A lot of his premises, I do agree. I don't believe everybody's equal except in dignity. I think people are equal, even when the American Constitution is equal. I'm not the American Constitution, the Declaration and everything. I think all men are created equal in dignity, but I think people do excel past the others. Some people are more excellent than others. I do believe that's for a fact. I'm not saying that people should not have equal dignity, but some people are more excellent than others. Like it's just I mean. It's hard for me to say that. I know this is very debatable. So I think so a lot of what he's saying. I don't know if he knows how to implement it in the discourse that was presented today. I'll have to look back at it again and look back at his stuff. But he does make a lot of strong points. But overall, I don't see how this is going to happen because it's like a new religion that will have to be started to implement all this stuff on altruism and it's a tall order. It's a tall order. I'll look more into it and we'll get back. I know you said you'll have him again. I'll have him again. I'd like to talk to him again and maybe some other platforms I can talk to him. But yeah, but thanks very much for the talk. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, sure. When it comes again, I'm going to be having yourself, Chloe, and most likely Steve. I thought Steve was just the critique that Steve was bringing out. I wished I had thought about those points that he brought out. I really liked the points that Steve was bringing out. So in the next conversation, I'd like you guys to join me to talk to him. I may just sit back and let you do all the questioning. But yeah, it's a good one. So Chloe, any further thoughts?
I guess still thinking about your civic duty and your civic rights and everything like that is still a matter of if you are willing to pay your time and pay attention. I think that the people that pay the most attention have more power in our political system. I think that, I remember, when people were talking about the Tea Party rising in the United States, and they noticed that it was mostly older people, it was mostly, older conservatives that, kind of how did, they kind of become a very powerful voting bloc because they consistently vote. They consistently take the time out of their day to do these things, and they are paying into a system, and therefore they're getting stuff in return.
Sorry, but I've got to say just one thing. You're forgetting that money is actually more powerful than the vote. I mean, look at what's going on in Wisconsin and the allegations into the quote-unquote Zucker bucks. You've literally got where Mark Zuckerberg might have swung the Wisconsin election by literally changing the election rules for the state without the state passing them in Congress, just by paying out his money.
So I'm not like, so I understand that there are like those larger scale corruptions, right? But like if we actually had like if we have a system the way that the system ideally should work, right? The way that people are saying that it works currently, that is still the system that Lewis is disagreeing with. And my argument is that it still works the same way because not everyone is going to vote. Not everyone wants to vote. Not everyone cares enough to vote. Like if there is like a school board issue, it's the parents that actually have the most attention, that pay the most time. And like if you look in like California, all the like school board members are even now being arrested because people are asserting the things that they can pay, which is their attention and time and passion and knowledge, and to actually get results done. And that's the system. I think it's in a way it is kind of agreeing with Lewis, but I think that we already potentially have that system, and we just need to get the corruption that you're talking about out.
Yep. I mean, first thing we got to do is shut down the corruption. Then after that, we need to shut down the tyrannies of cities. I mean, let's take New York, for example. The city of New York has almost as many people as the rest of the entire state does, if not more.
Yeah.
All that you got to do to win the state of New York is win New York City. Whereas if we set up our own electoral colleges in each and every state, that would help mitigate the tyranny of the city. I mean, look at California, for example. You go out into the countryside and they've got almost as much stuff that wants to kill you as the state of Texas does, but yet the people that aren't in the city have got to jump through so many hoops to get a gun. It's actually disgusting. All because of the fact that when you go to LA or San Francisco, if you're shooting a gun off in your apartment, you might be hitting people 4 or 5 apartments down from you, 10 apartments down from you, because of the way that people are packed in the cities, making guns such a dangerous issue for them. Whereas when you go out into the country, you're more in danger when you don't have guns because a hungry bear could come up on you, some hungry coyotes could come up on you, and next thing you know, you're getting ate up.
That's a fact, man.
Yep. As far as shutting down the corruption, though, the easiest way is to get money out of all of it. Take away the rights of the politicians and their spouses. In fact, take their entire family's ability to trade in stocks away from them while the person's in office. Take away their ability to take away the abilities to be able to bribe them, to where literally the only money that they get would be whatever salary the state, not the politicians, vote to give out. I mean, it's ridiculous that Congress literally pays for itself with our tax money instead of, for example, the representative from Arkansas getting paid by the state of Arkansas. The senator from Kentucky gets paid by the federal government instead of the state of Kentucky, which means he's got no loyalty to the people in his state. He's already bought off by the federal government because of the fact that they're paying his salary instead of his constituents.
That's a very good point he is making. Something that never occurred to me, that if these legislators, if they are being paid by the federal government, then what loyalties do they have to their people aside from when it comes to election cycle? They just go and do all their normal charade, get the votes, and then forget the people till the next election cycle.
Exactly. I mean, the people are the way that Congress was originally designed, in which I think we should go back to. The House of Representatives were voted for by the people. They were the people's voice. That's why the House of Representatives is based on how many people you got in your state instead of, say, maybe 2, 3, 4 per state. It's why you might see a good chunk of the aisle being taken up by, say, California, New York, while you might only see one person in the House from, say, Vermont. They were supposed to be paid via a vote by the people on what they were supposed to get per year. And it was supposed to be done based off of how much the people liked you. Like, let's say you were fighting hard for them in Congress, actually being loyal to them. You might get a huge pay that year. And then let's say you stabbed them in the back the next year. Boom. You go back down to basically what the middle class there might make per year. And then on top of that, the Congress has created so many crooked methods of being able to get money not only for themselves, but for their freaking campaigns. Did you know that, for example, Joe Biden can still be fundraising for 2024, and he was able to do it since the day after he got named president. From then until 2024, he can collect all of the campaign donations he wants. Donald Trump literally cannot take a single campaign contribution until after the election in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a lot of corruption, and is what, like, it sounds like, what you're talking about is, especially for like the congressman, like a performance bonus, performance reviews, right?
Not just performance bonuses and reviews, but literally having your entire salary, what you might make based off of how much your people liked you.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I'm saying, performance reviews by the people, by your constituents that voted you in. Yep. That's what I'm saying. And it's you could tell, like, Trump got a lot of flack for saying he wants to run the country like a company, but there are a lot of positive methods that companies do utilize in order to get the right leadership and to make sure that they have checks and balances, because like there are people that despite like people don't like them, but their performance of they actually do the job that they sign up for. Like for example, for Blizzard Activision, whatever, everyone hates this guy Bobby Kotick, but the thing is, he got the investors the money that they were looking for, so he gets the bonuses, and it's performance based off of what he signed up to do, and he did that. And having, like, I think, clear metrics. I unfortunately, in American politics, it's so emotional based that people have short memories, and also people don't really have enough time, or even they don't receive the benefits of spending that much time and attention on monitoring their own congressman. I remember a video of basically
it gets even worse than the people not monitoring their congressman. Hell, have you ever seen the size of a bill? You might get handed one that you might have to read in maybe 3 hours that's multiple thousand pages long.
A lot of pork.
Yep, all because of the fact that they're adding in shit shit that's got nothing to do with the bill at all, what its purpose is. It might be that they're adding another 50,000 to their own pockets. They might be extending the Patriot Act again.
Yeah.
But since they're tacking it on to, let's say, for example, a bill to, let's say, give funds to food pantries, for example. Everyone sees that it's entirely for food pantries and nobody's talking about what else is on them.
No one reads it.
Exactly.
And if they question, oh, I guess you don't like food pantries, like, no, but it says here that you're a dictator for life. What the hell? Why did you put in a food pantry bill? That's a hyperbolic example. But yeah, like I remember
they pretty much have. Just about every bit of crooked corruption that they pulled has been added onto another fucking humanitarian bill.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and again, like this is something that like this happens in my professional life, right? Like if you're in an organization and you're making a document that other organizations or the other people in your organization have to abide by, that document is drafted. It has to be reviewed. It has to be boarded. Other people have to agree, okay, this is the document that we're going to put out there and we're going to agree on. And I think that is a system that should be the case for, when we have these bills, right? Like they should see the evolution of it. They should have people be able to provide comments, reviews, critiques before this is the final version of the bill that you have to put forth. But like it has inherently, for that process to happen, it has to have, it has to be readable and people have to read it. If no one reviews it, if no one provides any comments, it shouldn't go any further.
Yep. And another thing, instead of voting on it 3 hours after it gets sent forth to be voted on, it should be available to everyone in the general public for like 2, 3, 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So that everyone can read it, everyone can get through every page of it, and be able to contact whoever's supposed to be representing them in the House to tell them, look, I'm against it. Or, yeah, I'm for it, but can you try to get this removed? Can you try to get that removed?
Right.
Yeah. So one thing I would like us to talk about some other time, not now, because we have to end the stream in, say, 5 minutes max. It's 2 hours already. I want us to talk about lobbying groups and why they even exist in the first place. Why are they lobbyists in politics? I think it just muddies the water. It makes it so corrupt where people can basically pay lobbying organizations to go and get their interest in Congress like a job. You go there and lobby for a certain position and then you get it. I think it's unfair to the people who vote in representatives, knowing fully well that the representatives can be influenced by something other than the interests of the people that put them in power. It's just bad.
I mean, it even goes, kind of further. Is like they don't necessarily even need to be paid up front. They just have to be promised a good salary with their company after they leave Congress or the Senate.
Yeah, and such things should not be allowed. So, guys, for this is where we'll come to the end of the discussion today. So, just parting words for now, Mr. Pelu, Unpopular, E, and Chloe.
I don't have too much important words. Like I said what I want to say before, but it was a good talk. I'll go look more at his work and then maybe to follow up. I have better questions for him. But it's just like I said. There's many ways to end corruption and things like that. Many different ideas about how to do that. Now, of course, it's going to take a dedication. That's why I said his idea sounds like a religion because you have to be you have to get everybody dedicated to this thing. But as leaving note, all of us in the world have to be more dedicated to fixing the governments that we run under because we live under these jurisdictions, we live on this law, we live in society, and we survive and fail with each other. So we all should take more notes, take more study of how we really being ruled and how we govern ourselves. And thanks for having the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pilon. Popular. Go.
Yeah, I just want to say, when I said what I said earlier, it wasn't directed at anybody, man. It was just, it's just a system, man. Man, man, it's just at this point, it just is what it is. You have to deal with it. And I agree with what Pelu just said. We have to try to find more ways to actually, solve problems, exercise our abilities and our skills to actually try to solve these problems. My frustration just had to deal with seeing a lot of people in my community going through this, starving, not being able to find jobs, government assistance, their children, it's a lot of pain. And man, it's a lot of bad stuff just going on, man. And I wasn't taking out anything that I said on anybody here on this panel. But yeah, man, that's my final thoughts and stuff. And I agree with everything Pelu just said. I agree with that. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. E.
Yeah, don't trust government. Reagan told us all the truth when he said that the scariest words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." They are corrupt as hell, and they will use any disaster to line their pockets. They'll also use any other method they can use to line their own pockets. Politicians don't care about us, but it's time we should make them care.
Thank you, E. Chloe.
Yeah, I definitely agree that we need a system that forces the politicians to realign their motivations to the people, because the way that the incentive structure is, there's no real incentive to make sure that they're actually following the will of the people, or even making sure that they're involved in a dialogue of having people understand what is happening and how the system works. Because that's another way that there is corruption, is that they make everything that's happening so opaque that no one can really call people to account to criticize them. And getting back to the original topic, I kind of I understand his argument, and I think but like, I worry that he's assuming that any type of disagreeing with his argument means that we just don't understand it enough. And I hope that in a future conversation we can have a more in-depth conversation about our critiques and how we understand his argument, and hopefully he takes seriously the potential flaws in it, and that it's a flaw that we are seeing in his idea, or maybe a particular implementation that he might not necessarily be as committed to, like with the taxes equal the political power type of thing. That's all.
All right, thank you guys. So let me just give my thoughts on the topic today. So people are not equal and should not have equal voting rights. I don't believe that. Yes, I do. In terms of the word equality, when you say equality, what do you mean by equality? You understand? If you want to take it in a literal sense, of course, people are not equal. No two people have the same height. Two people have the same weight. No two people have the same skills. Two people have the same capabilities, either mental, cognitive, psychological, emotional. It's all, like I said, it's all a spectrum of abilities. You understand? So in that sense, I do agree. But like he also said, people are equal in dignity. And that dignity you should be able to quantify it, and you should be able to express it. It's not enough to say, yeah, people are equal in dignity. Yet there's nothing identifiable to show or represent that people are actually equal in dignity. And one way I think that people's dignity can be expressed equally is in the vote. One man, one vote. You understand? So that becomes the great equalizer. Whether I'm rich, I'm poor, whether I'm big or small, you understand? That one vote that I have is my power, and is equal to any other person's vote in the country or in the society, and that should not be taken away from anyone. So I I get some of where it's coming from. I just don't see the utility of the system he's trying to propose, because it will fall to the same kind of problems that he is running away from, and it will just be unnecessarily bureaucratic, or there will just be too much calculations involved to get such a system working in the first place. So thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate Unpopular, Mr. Pelu, E, Chloe, Steve, Ogie, Ben, Christina, Bonridge, everyone. Thank you all for coming, and I'll catch you guys in the Wolf. Thank you too. I'll catch you guys in the next live stream. So it's bye for now.
Bye.